This is Beyond the Big Screen podcast with your host, Steve Guerra. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Big Screen podcast, where we talk about great movies and stories so great they should be movies. Links to learn more about our guest today can be found in the show notes. You can support Beyond the Big Screen on Patreon.com. By joining on Patreon, you help keep Beyond the Big Screen sustainable and get many great benefits. Go to patreon.com/Beyond the Big Screen to learn more and sign up. Find show notes, links to subscribe, and leave Apple Podcast reviews by going to our website, beyondthebigscreen.com. And now, let's go beyond the big screen.
Thanks for joining me on a very special episode of Beyond the Big Screen. Today, listener Bill Hickey is going to take over to talk about a film he thinks is underrated. Bill emailed me after the episode Josh Cohen and I did on our top underrated films. He shared a blog post he wrote about one of the films he thinks is underrated called Pretty Poison from 1968. He said the blog post was never published for a variety of reasons, which I thought was a shame because it was such an interesting and thoughtful post. So I invited him to record the audio and publish it on Beyond the Big Screen. So here you go. I hope you enjoy this guest episode. I very much want to offer up Beyond the Big Screen to people who want to publish guest episodes. It gives people a chance to hear voices and share their thoughts on great and possibly not so great films. Reach out to me by email or social media to find out more, and you can find out more in the show notes, and I will see you next time Beyond the Big Screen.
Hello, this is Bill Hickey, and this is my review and appreciation of the underrated movie Pretty Poison. Released on the last day of 1967, Pretty Poison was too smart and far too ironic for the Hollywood of the time to handle. It was the directorial debut of Noel Black, who was working off a well-crafted script by Lorenzo Semple Jr., from the novel She Let Him Continue by Stephen Geller. Pretty Poison appeared in the wake of the success of Bonnie and Clyde. It also marked the return to American feature films after 8 years of Anthony Perkins, who had gone to Europe following his starring role as Norman Bates. So naturally, the new movie was marketed as a hybrid, Bonnie and Psycho, which got it completely wrong. There are some similarities to the Warren Beatty-Arthur Penn classic. Pretty Poison can rightfully claim a definite film noir pedigree. The obvious antecedents of a young man and his pretty girl going on a crime spree are Nicholas Ray's 1948 They Live by Night and 1950's Gun Crazy by Joseph H. Lewis. Jean-Luc Godard's 1960 Breathless with Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg certainly fits into that tradition as well. And the tradition continued in 1973 with Terrence Malick's interpretation of the Starkweather murder rampage, Badlands, another pair of young lovers who leave a trail of dead bodies behind them in Middle America. Unfortunately, Bonnie and Clyde had been too recent and had made too big an impact. The fact that Pretty Poison co-star Tuesday Weld had actually been offered the role of Bonnie Parker by Beatty and Penn and had turned it down. She was a new mother and she didn't want to deal with the Texas heat. Made the comparisons easy. Bonnie and Clyde's huge presence put the new one in its shade. Even Pretty Poison's own advertising campaign picture, with Weld gleefully firing a revolver, her pert pink tongue clearly visible, promised more sex and violence. And it delivered, although not in the way audiences had been primed to expect. Noel Black was a product of the UCLA Film School like Francis Ford Coppola, and he came of age during the height of influence of the French New Wave in America. What brought him to the attention of Hollywood was an 18-minute short called Skater Dater, which is readily available on YouTube. It is a film with no dialogue about a group of 7 sidewalk skateboarders in Southern California. Skater Dater was nominated for an Academy Award. It remains highly influential. On that basis, Black was hired to direct Pretty Poison, which he shot entirely on location in Western Massachusetts. The screenwriter, Lorenzo Semple Jr., was a TV veteran who had worked on the series Batman, Burke's Law, and The Green Hornet. But his sole feature film credit was Fathom, a B-movie starring Raquel Welch. As mentioned, Anthony Perkins had returned to Hollywood and was enthusiastic about this project. And although Hollywood never seemed to know what to do with Tony Perkins, Noel Black had a pretty good idea. From the first scene, in a small, nondescript room, a cold opening prior to the credits, Semple and Black announced that their movie would be about something other than gunplay and car chases. Morton Azenauer, played by John Randolph, a psychiatric caseworker, is conducting an exit interview with Dennis Pitt. Perkins, looking not a day older than when he was the proprietor of the Bates Motel. Although the memory of the event that made Dennis an inmate hangs over their brief conversation, everything is proceeding nicely. Until, that is, Dennis says that he's been studying in order to be on the first space probe to Venus. "Stop that," Mr. Azenauer barks. And so we learn that although he protested he was just joking, Dennis has a problem with fantasizing. Sternly, Azenauer tells Dennis that he's going out into the real world now, and it's got no place at all in it for fantasies. Cut to a green field. A band of high school majorettes marching to loud fife and drum music, and the credits rolling. Soon, amidst all the fresh faces and flashing bare legs, the camera finds blonde Tuesday Weld, holding a flag, stepping smartly, and looking straight ahead. The camera isn't the only thing watching her. Perched on a fence, with a wide smile on his face, is Dennis, obviously smitten by the image of sublimated sexuality. So we're 5 minutes in, and Pretty Poison has given us our 3 principles and set the stage for action. All that awaits is the discovery process. And discovery is what separates Pretty Poison from all those other boy-girl gun movies, and what helps it hold up so well.
Steve here again. We are a member of the Parthenon Podcast Network, featuring great shows like Josh Cohen's Eyewitness History and many other great shows. Go to Parthenon Podcast to learn more. And now, here is a quick word from our sponsors.
Dennis, literally sitting on the fence when he sees Weld, is on the lam. Without his caseworker Mr. Azenauer's knowledge, he left his job that had been arranged for him a year ago and has taken employment at the Sausenfeld Chemical Corporation in Western Massachusetts. He seems to be okay, but there are some disturbing signs. Dennis lives alone in a trailer. He monitors Russian language broadcasts on his shortwave radio. He has a miniature camera which he uses to take pictures secretly of the Sausenfeld plant's exterior. He's mailing those pictures to someone, but anonymously. It's clear that he thinks that something strange, probably illegal, is going on, but it's also implied that fantasy, now edging into paranoia, is reasserting itself. Not long afterward, Dennis is chatting with a short-order cook at a roadside stand across from Sausenfeld. They are discussing a newspaper report of a case of lascivious carriage at the local makeout spot. The cook is put off by the age of the man in the story. The older fellow must have taken advantage of the girl, the cook says. Dennis disagrees, pointing at the photo in the paper. Study the girlfriend, he says. She looks too innocent. Might be a case of entrapment. Then Sue Ann Stepanek, Weld, pulls up in her blue two-seater convertible. She needs someone to make change. Dennis is comically awkward at first, bumping his head and fumbling for coins, but when Sue Ann gets what she needs from the cook and goes to a payphone booth to make a call, Dennis pretends that he's some kind of operative. He hands her a small bottle of Sossenfeld product, cryptically tells Sue Ann she must meet him at the local movie theater that evening, and then jogs away with no further explanation. Sue Ann stares at his retreating form with wonder. That begins their relationship. At the start, Dennis is fully in command, sure of himself and dominant. He plays hard to get, talks in obscure code-like language, and intimates that strange, very important things are happening in their little town. He's cool and mysterious. Sue Ann is captivated. An A student planning for college, she lives with her mother. She never knew her dad, who was killed in Korea. Afflicted by boredom and restricted by her mother's rules, Sue Ann is ready for action. When Dennis reveals a sinister nature to the chemical spill-off from the Sossenfeld plant into the local waterway, the restless young beauty eagerly volunteers to serve. There are difficulties, however. Dennis discovers that Mr. Eisenhower has tracked him down. He worries that, having failed to comply with the conditions of his probation, he may be returned to his former institution. Working on the production line at the plant, his mind suffers snap flashbacks, which are one of the few new wave filming devices that Black uses. We see a house engulfed in flames, the incident that put Dennis away when he was 15, as well as those majorettes marching on parade. Inside and out, you can feel the pressure is building. Sue Ann has a more prosaic obstacle. Mom, played by Beverly Garland, and Mom's boyfriend, whom Sue Ann despises. She wants Dennis to use his special operative techniques to eliminate the problem somehow. Now, at first, Dennis says no, but once they become intimate, he agrees to help her. That burning house that Dennis Pitts saw in those snap flashbacks was his aunt's house. When he was 15, his aunt had discovered him playing doctor with his niece, Ursula. She punished him. In revenge, Dennis set fire to the house, not knowing that his aunt had returned from a trip and was inside, where she burned to death. Illicit desire had led to violence, death, and punishment. Not so Sue Ann. Sex and violence are a matched pair for her. When the two operatives go on a nighttime mission to sabotage the Sossenfeld Chemical Company, a night watchman catches Dennis, but the old man never sees Sue Ann, who smashes in his skull with a wrench. And when she realizes that the night watchman is still alive, Sue Ann casually rolls him into the shallows of the river and then sits straddle-legged on top of him until he drowns. Dennis starts to shed his old habits of mind. The killing of the watchman has unnerved him. His fantasy has turned into a horrible reality. The formerly cocksure secret agent becomes a weepy mass of facial tics and stutters. Gradually dropping all pretense, he guiltily confesses his past to Sue Ann, who's undisturbed. Like an experienced operative, she's more concerned with planning their getaway, especially once the police have found the night watchman's body. Dennis's fantasy crumbles. Sue Ann's enlarges. We could be a husband and wife team, sent all over the world on special missions, she tells a stunned Dennis. Or they could run away together to the non-existent Bay of Mexico. The moviegoer, like Dennis, senses a bigger disaster is imminent. Timing is everything. The real-life violence of 1968 definitely hurt Pretty Poison, which was a box office flop. It failed to cover its budget. It didn't propel Noel Black to eminence. It did nothing for the careers of Anthony Perkins, and it reinforced Tuesday Weld's bad cinematic luck. Lost in the backwash of Bonnie and Clyde, Noel Black and Lorenzo Semple's ironic little gem about deceptive appearances, madness, and self-discovery disappeared almost without a trace. You only learn what you discover for yourself, Dennis says in the film to Mr. Eisenhower. And the last scene of this brilliant movie shows that the veteran caseworker, who had once believed that there was no room in the world for fantasies, has also finally woken up to reality.